Hey folks, strap in. This is probably going to be a bit longer than usual because today we are doing something a little bit different. I say different, but I have done videos like this before where I have ranked the careers of a director or an actor. Today I'm taking on the challenge of one of my Mount Rushmores, one of my favorite directors of all time, Kevin Smith. What if I told you that a movie about two friends that worked in a convenience store and a video store, respectively, would not only change the landscape of cinema in 1994 forever, but also change this film lover's love of film going forward? My cinematic universe had now been absolutely blown wide open. I discovered Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Richard Linklater, Wes Anderson, and I would never ever look back. However, today we are looking back. This was a filmmaker whose career began with maxed out credit cards, working in a convenience store in the day, filming in the convenience store at night. He would give us Clerks before moving into more cult classics, some messy experiments, and films that always would tend to spark debates on online forums like moviepoopshoot.com. If you know, you know. For me, he is one of the most fascinating cases in modern film. He was an indie legend, a pop culture icon, a director whose filmography somehow includes both Clerks and Yoga Hosers. It is a career with some big wins, some weird swings, and some movies that make you go, wait, what? That's a Kevin Smith movie? So whether you're a View Askew diehard fan or a fan of that movie Kevin Smith made with the guy from Die Hard, maybe you just love his podcast and multiple cameos that he seems to have, the way he gets himself about. But either way, we're gonna settle this in the only way that I believe Kevin Smith would even know how. We're going to overanalyze his career. But a quick disclaimer, Kevin Smith himself has probably already made fun on his podcast. So good enough for him to do, good enough for me to do, good enough for you to do. So we are good. Let's start with our number 15, and it's Cop Out. So we are kicking off the list with some pretty low-hanging fruit. I think everybody knew Cop Out was going to be at the bottom of this list. It feels like it was directed by his substitute teacher. It's the one where he didn't write the script, he didn't really control the tone, and reportedly he clashed a lot with his lead actor Bruce Willis, someone he was dying to work with and ended up being a nightmare to work with. And honestly, when you watch the movie, all of that tracks. The dialogue is generic, the jokes are very studio safe. Tracy Morgan is clearly operating in a completely different movie to the rest of the cast. But what you do feel with this movie is that Kevin Smith is trapped inside a mid-budget buddy cop movie. He's desperately trying to escape back to his convenience store. There's no heart, there's no personality, most of all there's no View Askewniverse weirdness, just car chases, explosions, an above average performance from Stifler of all people, and Bruce Willis looking like he's daring the filmmaker to ask him for just one more take. Seriously, he looks angry, he looks grumpy. This is like Die Hard 4.0, which interestingly Kevin Smith has a cameo in. This is that Bruce Willis. Not the Bruce Willis of old, but the crap Bruce Willis who's given up. So for me, I just have trouble putting this anywhere else because yes, it's a Kevin Smith directed movie, but it doesn't feel like Kevin Smith in any kind of way. They brought him in and they didn't give him a chance to do him. They wanted him to do them, and that's what they got. Bruce Willis was clearly an animal behind the scenes. You just have to watch Kevin Smith's sort of like Q&As or stand-ups or evening wivs to know that he did not enjoy this process. This was an actor he loved and lauded, and then found out that actually he's kind of a dick. And you know what? That is exactly what happens when you hire a director not for their voice, but for their ability. Luckily, a year later, he would return with a movie that would wash the stink away, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. At number 14, Yoga Hosers. Little tiny Nazi bratwursts. Yeah, what more can you say about Yoga Hosers? This was the moment that a lot of Kevin Smith fans collectively got together and said, okay, Kevin, maybe not everything you spew out on your podcast needs to be a movie you have to make. It's a teen horror comedy about yoga-loving rock chicks fighting Nazi bratwurst monsters, which sounds like a cockamamie premise that Smith would come out while being totally coked out of his brain, and yet here we are. It is kind of a spiritual sequel to Tusk. It's based on the two annoying side characters, the two Colleens, played by his very own daughter Harley Quinn Smith, and Johnny Depp's daughter as well. Johnny Depp also reprises the Guy LaPointe role, which nobody was asking him to do. But you know what? Sometimes if you can make a movie and you can put your pals in it, why the hell not? We do also have Adam Brody from OC fame in there. And then we've got like an up-and-coming Austin Butler. He turns up in the movie actually delivering some pretty cool lines, but it doesn't really change the fact that this movie is, second last on a list of Kevin Smith movies. The humor is intentionally awkward. The dialogue does feel self-consciously quirky, almost like it's trying too hard. And the entire movie plays like an inside joke. I don't really know if Kevin Smith ever really cared if this movie worked, and honestly, it's kind of admirable. It was a vehicle for his daughter and her pal. However, Harley Quinn Smith and Lily Rose Depp were never going to be the female equivalent of Matt and Ben. But what I will say is they do have really good chemistry and good comic timing. But filmmaking without self-criticism isn't freedom of expression. It's kind of just pure self-indulgence. There's no real structure, there's no real escalation, and no reason this needed to be a movie. There is an audience for this movie, it's just quite small, and unless you're already fully locked into his movies, it feels less like one of his cult classics and more like homework, and that's why it lands at number 14. It's not the worst film he's ever made, but it's quite possibly the most self-indulgent. Number 13 is the Jay and Silent Bob reboot. This movie should have been an absolute slam dunk. Bouncing back from yoga hoses before we ran into Clerks 3, but it somehow answers the question that no fan of Kevin Smith was asking. What if Kevin Smith remade Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but much slower, much sadder, and way more self-aware? It's exactly what the title promises. It's a reboot, it's a remake, it's a sequel, it's a requel, it's a parody, it's a therapy session, all at the same time. It's wall-to-wall cameos, callbacks, jokes that only work if you've seen every Kevin Smith movie or project. And look, nostalgia can be fun when it's done right, but this movie absolutely just hinges on that fact, and it doesn't work without it. Every scene feels like it's elbowing you in the ribs, saying, hey, remember this? Remember when we did this and how much you liked it? Instead of actually giving you a reason to A, laugh, and B, be entertained. Jay's still Jay, he's doing Jay things, but this time he's a supposed dad. Silent Bob is still Silent Bob, but the energy just isn't there. What once felt anarchic and chaotic and breaking the mold and being new, fresh, and original now just feels rehearsed. Like you're watching your favorite band play all of their greatest hits at half speed. I will give it some credit though. There is heart there. Kevin Smith clearly loves these characters and this world. It hits the emotional beats, especially around fatherhood and legacy, which is something that Kevin Smith was sort of going through at that point in time, which is why it doesn't go straight to the bottom. It has some redeeming qualities, but it is just a reminder that self-awareness isn't the same thing as evolution, and sometimes the hardest thing to reboot is your own creative spark. Having said that, the revolving door of cameos is pretty damn impressive. I mean, they got Jason Biggs and James Van Der Beek back in the room together, and that for me is worth the price of admission alone. Number 12 is Tusk. Ah, yes. The movie that absolutely 100% did start as a podcast inside joke. Tusk is the tale of two movies. One half of Tusk is a tight, well-written, dialogue-heavy, comedic in tone and drama, with a tour de force Michael Parks performance that is exceptional. The second half of Tusk is Justin Long being sewn into a walrus suit, and me sitting there scratching my head, wondering, is this the point that it all went wrong for this director? It's a movie about a guy getting surgically turned into a walrus. Yes, a walrus. It's horrifying, it's gross, and it's also exactly the bizarre, self-indulgent experiment that I believe only Kevin Smith could dream up at this stage of his career. And let's be honest, all the day ones, like myself, were in the journey by now, so we were gonna watch it anyway. But the premise alone is enough to make the casual viewers double check what they're watching, or have they accidentally clicked on a David Cronenberg horror movie instead of a Kevin Smith comedy. And that's the thing, this movie isn't trying to be funny. I mean, it's trying in a way that only Kevin Smith could actually make someone being turned into a walrus funny, like awkward funny. As you sit there slapping your head, it inspires laughter, but mostly like that kind of laughter that is just sheer disbelief. But what I will say is that Justin Long commits like crazy. Michael Parks is predictably excellent. Haley Joel Osment plays a little part in this movie because why the hell not? But you know what? No amount of excellent performance can make a full-length feature about a human to walrus transformation feel normal or good or even slightly remotely comfortable. Tusk could have been a bold, surreal horror comedy. Instead, it's strange, it's totally confused mess. It's a horror movie with awkward comedy, a commentary on obsession that feels obsessive in the wrong way, and the finale just leaves you asking, wait, what the hell? Did that just really happen? Like, those closing scenes of this movie, I was wondering, was this all a dream? Like, have I been dreaming this? But it's fascinating and it's memorable, and it's one of the few Kevin Smith movies that you will never forget. In the same way that when you saw Human Centipede for the first time, you will never ever forget that movie either. You won't forget Tusk. Number 11 was a really hard one for me because it's Clerks 3. At the time of recording this, this is the final chapter in the Clerks saga, and honestly, it does pain me to have this outside of the top 10 because Jeff Anderson, after having a little bit of a break and having faded into obscurity for a few years, he came back strong as hell, like he never left. Clerks 3 was Kevin Smith returning to his roots. But here's the thing, instead of pushing things forward, this movie feels more like a bit of a nostalgia grab wrapped in a huge meta joke, which is his thing, about the process of making the first movie, Clerks. While I get where Kevin Smith was at this period in his life, he'd had some personal issues, some health issues, so I get where he was, but that does feel like a little bit of a problem for this movie in particular. There is heart, there's a lot of real emotion, especially when it comes to the themes of aging, loss, legacy, but it's hard to ignore that half of Clerks 3 feels like a retirement speech. Kevin Smith's characters, Randall and Dante, are dealing with the aging, the weight of life, personal struggles that come when you've lived half of your life and you have some regrets. It's about Kevin Smith himself trying to reconcile his own legacy. The movie is constantly winking at the audience, reminding you how important Clerks was for indie film, trying to emotionally drag me through the idea that this is in fact the end of an era. We're doing that final tour and we're giving you all of the best bits, when really what I'm looking for is something fresh, something new. And again, I jump back to like the meta references. It genuinely does feel a little bit like a documentary of how Clerks got made. It's kind of the point of the story, and it is being self-reflective from Kevin Smith projecting onto Dante and Randall. Is it terrible? No, it's not terrible, not by a long shot. I still love this movie, and it is emotionally powerful. Jeff Anderson can deliver a monologue like nobody else. He can deliver a Kevin Smith monologue better than most people can. So it isn't terrible, but it is a movie that lives in the past. It's wallowing in pity in its present. The movie ends where it begins, and while that's very comfortable, it just doesn't stand out compared to like some of his other filmography, but also the Clerks trilogy as a whole. It's not the best of the three, is what I'm trying to say. Number 10, we're breaking into the number 10, and we're starting with Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Who remembers this movie? Because when I went back through the filmography, I was like, oh yeah, that was a Kevin Smith movie. But if you've ever wondered what it would look like if Kevin Smith made a rom-com with a porno twist, so Chasing Amy Does Dallas, I guess, would be Zack and Miri Makes a Porno, This is the answer to the question, starring some really hot property of the time. You had Seth Rogen, you had Elizabeth Banks, Justin Long's in there, Brandon Routh's in there, you had Craig Robertson. Like, there are a ton of people in this movie. And on paper, this film does sound like the perfect match for Kevin Smith. It's got crude humor, it's an outlandish premise, and a whole bunch of raunchy dialogue. Yet, while Zack and Miri does have its moments, it falls flat in a number of areas, one of which kind of being the chemistry between Seth Rogen and Elizabeth Banks. The chemistry, for me, sadly just isn't there. And at the start of the movie, that is kind of the point, but towards the end of the movie, when I'm supposed to believe that these two characters are falling in love for realsies, I just wasn't really feeling it. So what could have been a clever twist on friendship, love, the absurdity of life, instead gets bogged down by the obvious tension between the "oh, we're just friends" dynamic and the predictable romantic comedy arc. The film tries to blend these things together with raunchy humor and real emotion, but the shift between the two is jarring because, like I said before, the chemistry's just not really there. One minute they're laughing at the gross out joke, and the next you're supposed to care about whether these two characters actually will fall in love. It sometimes feels like it's walking the line between goofy and sentimental, but often doesn't stick the landing, and that's kind of the big thing about the movie as to why it's so low on my list. So it is a good movie, don't get me wrong, but it's not as clever as it thinks it is, and ultimately it's stuck in a very weird place between a funny concept and a full-on rom-com formula that just doesn't really work, and we end up with Zack and Miri Makes a Porno. Definitely not the worst film he's ever made, but considering the cast, considering the crew, considering everything this movie had going for it, kind of does fall flat. Number 9 is Jersey Girl. This really hurts having this at number 9. I moved this movie so many times on this list because honestly, I love Jersey Girl. And it might be the most misunderstood movie that Kevin Smith has ever made. Jersey Girl came out exactly at the wrong time. It was the right movie for Kevin Smith, the right movie for Ben Affleck, everyone involved, but it came out at precisely the wrong time. And that was due to Rotten Tomatoes' lowest scoring movie of all time, Gigli. Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez had become box office kryptonite. The internet was going off on that movie. Kevin Smith had the audacity to make a sincere, low-key movie about grief, about parenthood, about growing up, and people did not want this with these two actors. And here's the thing, Jersey Girl is actually fantastic. I do think that the backlash from Gigli is why we got the weird thing about J-Lo dying at the start of the movie. It's soft around the edges. It's a heartfelt movie about a guy whose life collapses and then slowly he tries to rebuild it around his daughter. Affleck's at his peak here with a solid as hell performance. George Carlin is scene-stealingly great, and the movie's emotional beats land way more often than I think people would remember. Yes, it's a little bit corny. Yes, the romance subplot with Liv Tyler feels a little bit undercooked, and yes, Kevin Smith occasionally can't resist undercutting sincerity with a joke. Jersey Girl is focused. It knows what it wants to say, and it says it without drowning in callbacks and meta commentary. This is one of the most sincere films I think he's made since Chasing Amy. But what we have here is a filmmaker who's trying to grow up as a filmmaker, and audiences just weren't ready to grow up with him. So it is a little bit flawed, but it's very honest. And in a career that borderlines on pure indulgence and nostalgia at times, that counts for a lot for me. If you ever wanted a perfect double bill of who Kevin Smith was and who Kevin Smith would become, put this movie beside Chasing Amy. They're a perfect companion. Number 8 is Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, the original to the reboot. A movie that came out at such a great time and was so much fun, and I genuinely do love Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. This should probably be a little bit higher, but I think number 8's pretty fair. It's the moment Kevin Smith fully looked at his own fan base and said, alright, let's get stupid. Let's tie all of this together, the View Askewniverse, everything we've been doing, and let's make something fucking cool. And what we got was a loud, chaotic, aggressively juvenile, absolutely stuffed with jokes that really should not work, and somehow they all do. This movie is basically a live action cartoon powered entirely by weed, internet arguments, and early 2000s energy. The soundtrack is unreal. The cameos are unreal. The jokes are insane. You've got Sean William Scott, you've got Shannon Elizabeth, you've got Will Ferrell of all people, and is any of it subtle? No! But it's smart. Occasionally, in the dumbest way possible, the entire movie just feels like Kevin Smith is actually trolling his critics. He's roasting Hollywood and turning his own characters into punchlines, and somehow the self-awareness makes this the most glorious project, I think, he's ever done. And what is so cool about this movie is that it's all about his two favorite characters. It's all about Jay and Silent Bob, and Jason Mewes is in his bag in this movie. This is the best performance I believe Jason Mewes has given Kevin Smith in any of his movies, because he was just so out there, and he's been great in everything else, but this was like his moment. This was like, okay, we've been making movies for years and you've been making me play this character that is essentially me, but now I get to be front and center, lead this movie. What I will say is, going back and watching it, not every joke does land, and some of them have aged, let's say, pretty questionably. But this is one of those movies where the confidence makes up for the lack of restraint. It knows exactly what it is and never pretends to be anything more. It's messy, immature, and most of all, it's a bit of me. But it's also Kevin Smith at his most unapologetically fun. Number 7 is the 4:30 movie, not only the latest movie in Kevin Smith's filmography, but also the most quietly confident movie I think Kevin Smith has made in years. This is absolutely a comeback film for Kevin Smith. Yes, he's made some dodgy stuff over the last few years. 4:30 movie absolutely is a Kevin Smith movie that feels completely out with everything he's done before. And with the 4:30 movie, what you get is a small, personal, and refreshingly low stakes. There's no View Askewniverse chaos. There's no endless callbacks. There's no cameo speed runs. Just a coming-of-age story about a bunch of kids. That's what works. That's what all works. And I'm not saying we don't get cameos. I'm not saying we don't get meta commentary, because of course we do. We get all of that. It's just not looking back at his career and saying, look when I did this, look when I did that. It's more looking back at cinema, friendship, and Hollywood, and looking back at the golden age of what Kevin Smith enjoyed. Which is why it does feel like Kevin Smith is remembering why he fell in love with films in the first place. The humor's gentler, the pacing's more relaxed, and instead of screaming for attention, the film just lets moments exist. It's very nostalgic without being exhausting, and it's self-aware without being self-congratulatory. The performances are solid, the vibe is cozy, the movie actually trusts the audience to care without being constantly reminded of Kevin Smith's legacy. That alone makes it stand out in his later filmography. Is it the perfect movie? No, I'm not saying it's the perfect movie, and if you're looking for peak chaos and quotable lines, this really isn't that movie. That's kind of the point. It's Kevin Smith making something modest and sincere and surprisingly mature. He's a different director now. It feels like he's a different director now, and I hope that he continues this trajectory and keeps making these kind of heartfelt, different movies. It's the most sort of John Hughes movie that Kevin Smith could potentially make, and we know that Kevin Smith loves John Hughes movies. And that's why it lands in the top 10. It's why it lands where it lands at number 7, not because it's the flashiest movie or the funniest movie, but because it's honest in a way that his recent work, for me, just often hasn't been. Number 6 is Clerks 2, a rare sequel that actually understands why people love the original and then lets those characters grow without completely losing their edge. Whereas in Clerks 3, I thought they pretty much did the same as what they'd been doing in the previous two movies. We weren't really moving forward, we were more looking back. Clerks 2 absolutely tries to do that. These characters grew up a little bit from that first movie, still immature, But in this movie, they're a little bit older. They're starting to realize that actually we're going to have to get real jobs. We're going to have to do this. We can't just keep messing about. What it does is it trades the raw, the gritty, the black and white misery of their first movie for full color. They move to a fast food joint and a slightly more optimistic worldview. Dante and Randall are older, a little sadder, and still very much stuck, but now the movie is actually interested in what that means. The jokes are bigger, they're dumber, and way more explicit. We do have a donkey show in there after all, but the emotional core is stronger than you'd expect. Randall's speech about Dante settling for a life he doesn't actually want is one of the most sincerest moments Kevin Smith has ever written. And again, Randall getting the dialogue he needs to deliver, getting the monologue he needs to deliver, he always does this. And when he gives it to Jeff Anderson and lets Jeff Anderson run with it, we get some absolute gold. Some characters, when they come out with these big speeches, it doesn't work because you didn't earn it. Jeff Anderson, Randall, always earns that moment. That said, going back and rewatching it, it's definitely a movie of its time. It definitely leans into early 2000s shock humor. Again, the donkey show. Some jokes land perfectly, as in the Lord of the Rings speech. Others feel like Kevin Smith is daring the audience to cancel him retroactively, like the stuff with Wanda Sykes. But despite all that, Clerks 2 has heart. It has real heart oozing through its pores. It's a movie about friendship. It's a movie about the fear of change. And it's a movie about realizing that not chasing what you actually want is, in fact, a choice in itself. A choice you maybe shouldn't make. It can be crass. Once again, the donkey show. I'm going to keep mentioning the donkey show with Kinky Kelly and the sexy stud. But, you know, it's also one of Kevin Smith's most honest films. One of the most honest films he's ever made. Like, definitely at that point in his career where he was, going back and doing Clerks 2 and reigniting the love of the Clerks franchise and the View Askewniverse was 100% the right choice to make, and his fans needed Clerks 2 at the time it came round. As I know I did. I'm talking for myself. I know I did. So before I get into my number 5, I need to drop a little story on you, and this is exactly why I'm doing this episode. It's why I'm doing this rank. Don't worry, this is not me doing sponsorship or anything like that. Lately, I have been in the new studio. I had to tear down the old studio and rebuild. That was because at the tail end of last year, I kind of lost a little bit of passion for all of this, for 2 reasons. One reason was I was going hard at my job, my day job, and I was trying to like get myself somewhere and do something. So I went in for 2 different jobs. They didn't quite work out, which is all good. It's actually worked out for the best. The other reason that I lost some of the passion for all of this was that I actually interviewed Kevin Smith last year. It was the second time that I got to interview Kevin Smith. The first time was 2 years ago when the 4:30 movie was coming out, and I absolutely adored that interview. It was only like 15-20 minutes, which when you're talking to Kevin Smith just does not last. You get one question in there and then it's time to basically wrap things up. But then I got the chance a year later, almost to the day that I did the first interview. Dogma was getting the Blu-ray release, finally got the rights back from Harvey Weinstein and Bob Weinstein, and so they contacted me again. Would you like to sit down and talk to Kevin again about the Dogma release? Absolutely. Like, I got to speak to him once. I never got to imagine that would ever happen. So we get on the call, we're doing the call and everything like that, and basically we're talking about Dogma. We've got some really good stuff in there. He remembered the first interview. He remembered me. We kind of made a joke about this now being like our anniversary, because I made a joke about it being like a year from the day. So he was like making a cool time of all that. He's genuinely a cool ass dude. Like, I absolutely loved talking to him. I got to ask him about Red State as well. I took a cheeky opportunity to talk about Red State, which is one of my favorite Kevin Smith. Like, we're going to talk about it in a second. Talking about that felt like it's something he doesn't always get to talk about, but he genuinely wants to talk about. So that was really nice. And then we made a joke as we were wrapping out. Hey, let's do this again next year. Let's do this again next year. Let's make it our anniversary. So again, you don't have to believe any of that, because that interview isn't in the feed. Because basically, when I went into the call on the Zoom, it automatically records. And I had to press pause on the record because Kevin wasn't there. We were waiting for him to come in. So I pressed pause on the record. He comes in, we get talking, and we straight away just go into it, and we talked for about half an hour, a little bit longer than the first time, and it was all gold. I was in my element. I was loving that interview, and I felt like he was having a good time with it too. He gets off the call, I come out with the call, and guess what? So I didn't record any of it. Devastated, absolutely gutted that I would do something like that. Such a rookie error, such a mistake. I've been doing the podcasting and interviews and whatnot for about 10 years now. It was shit. It was shit. There's no other words for it. It was just shit. And I kind of just felt like, that's it. That's it. And I let it get to me, and then that's just a quick sidebar as to why I wanted to do Kevin Smith's filmography. I wanted to rank him worst to best, because I feel like I'm now back in my groove. With that said, Kevin, if you ever want to jump back on, we joked about making it a yearly thing. Okay, we can just pretend we skipped a year. We didn't. It did happen. You guys don't have to believe me, but it did happen. So let's get into the final 5, the top 5 Kevin Smith movies ranked worst to best. Number 5 is, I just mentioned it, it's Red State. I love Red State. I think John Goodman in Red State is absolutely brilliant. I think Michael Parks is unbelievable in that movie, and this is like Kevin Smith's most un-Kevin Smith movie, I feel like, apart from Cop Out, I feel we've ever had. It's so different, and I love it for that. Red State is the movie that Kevin Smith looked at his entire career and said to himself, what if I just tried to scare the absolute living crap out of you instead of making you laugh? And then we got Red State. It's mean, it's angry, it's completely uninterested in being funny in any way. It does have funny moments that are kind of awkward, that make you think, I shouldn't really be laughing at this, but I am laughing at this. And that alone makes it one of the most fascinating things Kevin Smith has ever directed. There's no stoners, there's no pop culture monologues, it's just religious extremism, cultism, paranoia, and violence that spirals completely out of control. Messy, intense, it's consistently shifting gears. The movie refused to settle into one genre. It's bouncing from horror to thriller to drama to near political satire. All of that unpredictability works completely in its favor. You never quite know where it's going, and neither do the characters. Michael Parks, as I mentioned before, is the secret weapon of this movie. His performance is both terrifying and charismatic and uncomfortably believable. He dominates every scene he's in, and he proves that Kevin Smith can direct powerhouse dramatic performances. For me, is Red State perfect? I kind of actually do believe it is. I feel it's completely underrated. I think in Kevin Smith's filmography, it gets totally overlooked. It's definitely one of the most accomplished pieces he's ever made that just feels so different to anything he's ever made. So yeah, I do think this movie is pretty perfect. The third act does go a little bit off the rails, and you can feel Kevin Smith kind of wrestling with how hard he wants to push this message. But even at its weakest, this movie is trying something very bold. It's pushing the limits, and it's actually pulling it off. That's why Red State makes my top 5. Not because it's the most Kevin Smith movie, but because it's the one movie Kevin Smith directed that proved it doesn't have to be the most Kevin Smith movie ever made. I love Red State. I'm a big fan. Having it in number 5 is a little bit of a heartache, but you'll understand why when you get the rest. Number 4 is probably most people's favourite. It's Mallrats. It's the movie that proved Kevin Smith could actually survive failure and somehow accidentally make an absolute cult classic in the process. And when it first came out, let's be honest, it did bomb. The critics hated it and most audiences ignored it. Kevin Smith very nearly didn't get that third movie, and yet somehow this loud, dumb, endlessly quotable mess became one of the most beloved comedies of the 90s. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Dazed and Confused, Mallrats just added to all of those movies. It was counterculture in a microcosm, and you remember how that all felt and what those days were like. Brody and TS are two of the best characters. Brody himself, Brody Bruce, is just a sensational character from Kevin Smith. But let's be honest, Mallrats is all vibes. The plot barely matters. It's just dudes hanging out in a mall complaining about relationships, pop culture references, and life. Basically, it's the blueprint for internet discourse before the internet really fully took off. The movie's confidence in its own stupidity is what makes it. It's what works. It doesn't apologize. It just goes harder, doubles down, and commits even more. It is a little bit self-indulgent, and it is deeply 90s, and yes, some of the humor hasn't aged all that well, but the energy in this movie is undeniable. It's a brilliant little film with some cracking performances that when you go back and rewatch this, you will actually remember how good Mallrats is. That's why it lands at number 4. Messy, juvenile, and endlessly rewatchable. That's exactly why people still love it. And that Stan Lee cameo, how he pulled that off in his second movie. Let's remember, this was his second movie. And it's as good as it is. And it still stands the test of time. And before we move on, what a soundtrack, by the way. What a soundtrack. Number 3 is Dogma. We just spoke about Dogma before. He has now got it back. He's been able to release it in select cinemas. He's been able to release it on Blu-ray. It's so cool that he's got that back after getting it back from the hands of the Weinsteins, you know, like... Kevin Smith took some of his religious upbringing and aimed straight at the heavens, but it is his most ambitious, his most confident, and most confrontational. A religious satire starring fallen angels, prophets, demons, and a pair of stoners that honestly, on paper, none of this should work. And yet, Dogma absolutely does. Not just as a comedy, but as a genuine exploration of faith, belief, and the messiness of religion itself. And that's what makes it special. It's not cynical. Yes, it's irreverent as hell, but it's also weirdly sincere. Kevin Smith isn't mocking belief, he's interrogating it, he's questioning the institution. For a guy known mostly for dick and fart jokes and pop culture riffs, that's a huge swing, and he nails it. The cast is stacked. Obviously, the cast is stacked. At this point, he can pretty much hire whoever he wants. Affleck, Damon, perfectly cast as the fallen angels, both charming and terrifying. Chris Rock brings surprising warmth as Rufus, the forgotten apostle. Linda Fiorentino grounds the piece with quite a theatrical performance. Alan Rickman is pitch perfect as the Metatron, delivering exposition with dry wit and authority. And yes, Jay and Silent Bob are here, but for once they actually serve the story instead of just merely being there and hijacking it. It's a talky movie, but every conversation feels like it matters. It's not just people riffing, it's ideas clashing, it's belief versus doubt, it's faith versus rules, it's humanity versus divine bureaucracy. Is it flawless? No. It's not. It's some effects, they just haven't aged all that great. And a few jokes do push a little bit too hard into shock for shock's sake. And the ending, while emotionally resonant, feels slightly rushed for a movie dealing with such massive scoping themes. But Dogma is fearless. It's Kevin Smith using his voice to ask big questions, not just make people laugh. It's a rare film that can offend people while still feeling deeply personal, oddly compassionate, and completely respectable. And that's why it's number 3. Not just because it's funny, but because it proves Kevin Smith was capable of making a movie about everything without losing anything in the process. Number 2 is Chasing Amy. If Clerks was Kevin Smith proving he had a voice, Chasing Amy was him proving he had something to say with that voice. This was his second movie, and while the first movie was kind of mostly all about jokes, this is the movie where the jokes did not disappear, but they kind of shared the screen with vulnerability. I think most people can see themselves in at least one of these characters. This isn't a will they, won't they romantic comedy, it's more about the insecurities, the egos, the sexual politics, the emotional immaturity, and the brutal reality that loving someone doesn't automatically make you perfect for them. Ben Affleck delivers one of his best performances in the View Askewniverse. Holden, he's not a hero, he is insecure, he's pretty self-righteous, and he's blinded by his own fragile masculinity at times, and that's exactly why the film works. Smith doesn't shield him, he lets Holden unravel in full view. And then of course Joey Lauren Adams, she's absolutely sensational in the movie, she's the heart of the film, she's sharp as a tack, she's completely self-aware, she's funny as hell and emotionally open to giving Ben Affleck time to shine in his role as well. And I've already said, Jason Lee as Banky Edwards is equal parts comic relief and emotional antagonist. His presence isn't just about laughs, but it's also fear of losing a friendship or fear of losing something that you weren't quite ready to admit to yourself. Yeah, like there's so much going on in Chasing Amy. The long conversations aren't just clever, they're raw. When these characters argue, it doesn't feel scripted. They talk over each other a little bit. It feels very messy the way relationships would. It's not perfect. Some of the discussions around sexuality feel very much of their time, but even that adds to its identity. This is a mid-90s film grappling with ideas it didn't fully understand yet, and that struggle is part of its authenticity. Chasing Amy is Kevin Smith growing up on screen. I genuinely love Chasing Amy. Like, this sat at number 1 for a little bit, it moved to number 2, it went back to number 1. My number 1 and 2 were very interchangeable for a long time. He's stepping out from behind the pop culture debates and the dirty jokes and asking, why do we sabotage the things we love, which is a profound question. And he would come back to this kind of theme with the likes of Jersey Girl, 4:30 movie most recently, but honestly, this is where it all kicked off. It's a movie that I feel like Kevin Smith always wanted to make. And just like that, we are at our number 1, the end of the list, and the best movie that Kevin Smith has made, according to me, of course. And again, my number 1 and 2, probably my number 1, 2, and 3 are all kind of like interchangeable. But this is going number 1, because it is the movie that made me love Kevin Smith. It's the movie that made me love independent cinema. I found it exactly the right time in my life. The movie is Clerks. Clerks isn't just Kevin Smith's best film. It's lightning in a bottle. It's rebellion on a credit card. It's proof that if you've got something to say, you don't wait for permission. You cash in all your checks, you max out your bank cards, you grab a camera and you say it. Filmed at night in a convenience store Smith actually worked in, Clerks feels less of a movie and more like a captured moment in time. Two guys stuck behind a counter, customers from hell, endless debates about Star Wars contractors, a day that spirals from inconvenience into existential crisis. My God, this movie is everything growing up. It's your teenage years, it's your early 20s, it's your 30s, it's your late 40s. I would actually say Clerks, for all of its flaws and all of its foibles and eccentricities, it's actually a perfect movie. There's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes the dialogue goes on a little bit long. Yes, the camera work isn't amazing, but at the heart of it, the characters, the cast, the performances, there's nothing wrong with it. I find it hard, even now in 2026, to pick apart Clerks. And maybe that's nostalgia. Maybe that's member berries. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care what you think it is. It's just a movie that works on every level. Brian O'Halloran as Dante Hicks is one of cinema's most relatable protagonists. I'm not even supposed to be here isn't just a catchphrase, it's a world view. Dante represents every person who feels stuck between ambition and apathy, responsibility and resentment. Jeff Anderson's Randall is a chaotic counterweight, reckless, brutally honest, borderline sociopathic, let's be honest, and absolutely magnetic. He says things Dante won't. He says things we won't. He pokes the bruise. He turns small annoyances into philosophical warfare. And then you've got Jay and Silent Bob casually leaning against the wall of cinematic history as if they always belonged there. What makes Clerks special isn't just dialogue, though the dialogue does crackle with wit, speed, and authenticity. It's the honesty. The film doesn't glamorize being stuck. It doesn't sugarcoat relationships. It doesn't pretend these characters are cooler than they actually are. It changed indie filmmaking because it proved you didn't need glossy production or studio backing. You needed a voice. You needed perspective. You needed authenticity. I say that word a lot throughout this video, but that is what Kevin Smith brings you. Am I saying Kevin Smith was the first and only director to ever do this? No, I'm not. But he did it consistently. And whether you like all of his films, or you like some of his films and think some of his films are just straight trash, it doesn't matter. Because as a filmmaker, that's what he wanted to make at the time. That's where his head was at. That's where his passion was at. That's where his heart was at. So that's what he made. I don't think I'll talk as passionately about another director or another actor as I do when it comes to Kevin Smith movies. And that's because I have that nostalgia with him. I have that feeling with him. I've grown up with his movies. And even when he's gone off the rails a little bit, yeah, I've watched it. Have I loved it? No. Have I championed it? No. But I've watched it and I've been to see what he's done. And that's why I saw the trailer for 4:30 movie and I knew straight away Kevin Smith was back. And yeah, that's why Clerks goes to #1, because for a generation of movie lovers, especially those of us who grew up with video stores devouring VHS tapes, kids look it up, Google it, VHS, it was the shit, and arguing about films while we were in the video stores, our favourite films, what we were going to rent, Clerks felt personal. It was like someone had finally made a movie for us and about us. Anyway, that has been the Kevin Smith ranked worst to best. It's obviously a bit of a longer video. I did enjoy doing this. I loved going back and rewatching all these movies and remembering what I loved about Kevin Smith and what I love about his filmography. I've really enjoyed it. I feel like the list is, it's my list, so you might put things in different places. I think Red State might be a little bit lower for some people. I think Jay and Silent Bob Reboot might be a little bit higher for some people. These movies are very interchangeable. I do think my list on any other given day might change it up a little bit, but right now, in this moment, as I record, this is my list. It's my top 15 worst to best Kevin Smith movies. Hit me in the comments down below with anything you think I'm wrong about. Hit me in the comments. Let's keep that conversation going. We can talk about it till the cows come home. It's what I love to do. But honestly, thank you so much for sticking with me, sticking with the list. If you have enjoyed this ranked video, please do hit that like, hit that subscribe, and ding that notification bell. Please do go over to nerdly.co.uk. We like to cover everything from the big budget to the low budget to the no budget, with a special keen interest on the more independent and lower end of the scale. That's just where my heart lives and it's where it lies. But remember guys, if I do not see you through the week, I will see you in the cinema.